When I was first sent the spec for the Vulcanus and some pictures and asked if I was interested in taking a look, I thought, well, I have to. It's such an intriguing looking bit of kit, and it's so visual. You could see straight away that this could be a nice centerpiece, somewhere to gather around, and that's exactly what it's proved to be. I've had one of these in my garden at home for a couple of months in the earlier part of the summer. I've had a really good play with it, and it's fun to use and it's versatile. You can cook a lot of things on it. You've got a lot of surface to cook on. Around the edge you've got this steel plate, kind of like a plancha. You've got varying different heat spots. It's super hot close to the edge, and then you've got these cooler corners, and I really like that because when something gets a little bit too hot or it's charring a bit too fast, you just move it over to the corner, and we'll see that in a little bit. But you've also got the real fire in the middle. That's the crucial thing. You're always looking at flames or hot coals, and you've got the little wisps of smoke curling over the edge of the hot plate, and that's bringing you a little bit of flavour. And you've also got the option of sticking the big steel barbecue right over the top and cooking over those coals. So there's a lot you can do with it, and you can have 2 or 3 people, 4 people cooking at the same time. It's very, very social. And the funny thing is that one of the things I've been cooking on it a lot is vegetables. Now, that's not really a surprise here at River Cottage. We're very plants forward in our menu design and the recipes we're developing at the moment. You can see straight away that you could cook a steak or a piece of fish on this, but the first recipe I'm going to do today is actually a vegetarian recipe. It's all about this fantastic summer veg. A lot of us think of outdoor cooking as a mainly carnivorous affair, and fish gets a look in from time to time. But I have to say I'm really passionate about grilling vegetables out of doors, barbecuing them or cooking them here on the Vulcanus. I just love the flavours you get, that caramelisation. And the first dish I'm going to do for you is a completely vegetarian dish using this fantastic haul from the garden. We've got these hispy cabbages. If you've never had barbecued cabbage before, that's about to happen. These young onions, they're bigger than spring onions, but smaller than old onions. And the first harvest of these lovely little courgettes that have still got their flowers on. So I'm just going to prep this veg and get it on the Vulcanus, and you'll see just how quickly everything comes together. You've got these 4 plates of searing hot steel around the edges of the Vulcanus, and once you put something on that, it's going to cook really fast, and it needs your attention. I mean, it's great that it cooks fast. Who wants to hang around when you're hungry? But what this means is I want to get my veg really well prepped and organised so that I can just get it on there, and by the time the last bit of veg has gone on, probably the first one's going to need turning pretty quickly. So nice even cutting and well organised prep of the veg means that it can then all happen very fast once we start cooking. These hispy cabbages are great for grilling because they've got this lovely tight head, and when we cut through the middle, you'll just see, imagine that surface. Imagine that cut surface on the grill. We're actually going to cut them certainly into quarters. Now we'll have a look at that. I think we're going to go for 1/8. And I think we're going to use both these cabbages. These lengthways wedges. You can begin to see how this is going to sit on the grill. Roughly even. Now, I haven't left myself with a lot of stalk to work with, so that bit might fall apart. But we'll see how it goes. It's sort of held together by its own curls at the moment. Similarly with this one. So the wedges are slightly different, and we are going to have a few loose leaves, but that's all to the good. I'm going to do the second one the same way. Oh, I've got to go straight down the middle. You want to, it's this thick part that's holding the cabbage together, so you really want to cut that as close to the middle as you can so that when you go for those 1/8, you've still got a nice bit of stalk holding the wedge together. So I've got 2 cabbages divided into quarters, and quarters again gives me 16 wedges, and I'm just going to get them all off the grill and over here while I deal with the courgettes and the onions. Now we've got a bit of curl on these courgettes, so I'm going to work out what the best angle is. Fairly thick slices. I'm looking to maybe get 3 slices off of each courgette, maybe 4. But nothing too thin, or they're going to char away to nothing a bit too quickly. And it's useful to have a nice big blade like this for slicing these veg. This is a lovely variety of courgette, very tasty, but it does always like to curl, which makes it a bit challenging to prep. But it's behaving. Got these lovely yellow ones. It's a variety called Gold Rush. I'm not sure you could tell the difference in flavour in a blind tasting between the yellow and the green, but the fact that they're so colourful just makes them look, you know, the two together looks really delicious. I'm going to hold on to those flowers. I'm not going to put them on the grill because they'll shrivel up pretty fast, but I will come back to them and use them to garnish the finished dish. I may have slightly more courgettes than I need here. Just want to get a reasonable balance of the different veg. Finally, I've got these beautiful onions, and I've already given them a bit of a trim, but the slightly larger ones I'm going to cut in half, and the slightly thinner ones I'm going to leave them whole, and then they should cook at roughly the same rate. And I've left quite a lot of this green part on. They're so fresh, that's also going to be delicious. Time to get some of this lovely veg on the grill. Starting with the furthest place that I can comfortably reach. And I'm not going to jumble up the veg. It makes more sense if I see everything's cooking together. Still a good whack of heat coming off that grill. Oh, I think that needs to go in half again. You can hear the sizzle, and you can smell that caramelization. And this is something that, you know, earlier in the year I was doing this with asparagus, which finished a few weeks ago. I was taking lovely tight-hearted little gem lettuces and cooking them, preparing them almost exactly like this hispy cabbage, and they are grilling beautifully. And now this cabbage has just come good. It's a really, really lovely thing to put on the grill. So we've got a nice rack of cabbage there. Now let's put the courgettes in them. No, the onions will take a little bit longer than the courgettes, so let's put them here. Flat side down for the ones I've cut in half. I think that one might want to come in half actually. We've got these straight white ones that look almost like leeks. And we'll get the courgettes down this side. Now you'll notice I haven't oiled these at all. I'm putting these straight onto the seasoned plate, which has been seasoned with a very light film of oil. But I like that. I like the way that I don't want to fry them, you know. I want them to just char. So that means putting them straight onto essentially a dry plate. Feels like I can just about reach over there. And it's really satisfying to see this grill now just covered with this beautiful veg. And I'm pretty sure that the first cabbages I put on are going to be showing some colour. Yeah, look at that lovely colour. Not quite there yet. I'm going to nudge everything maybe a tiny bit closer to the grill. These thick stalky parts do take a little bit of cooking to get tender, so I'm just nudging them into the hotter zone. And there's a really pleasing logic about the way this whole bit of kit heats up. You know that these edges are fiercely hot, and you know that as you come a little bit further back, it's going to be a little bit cooler. And that's why I've loaded the stalky ends of the cabbage to the heat and the bulby ends of the onion, because those are the bits that need a bit more heat and need a little bit more cooking. I'm hearing a lovely sizzle. I'm smelling some delicious seared vegetable smells, and it's time to start turning these over. Yeah, look at that colour. That's just perfect. Nothing too fierce or black. And obviously the cabbage itself is starting to tenderize. You've got these seared edges, but the middle of the cabbage is kind of steaming through. In fact, you can see the steam coming off it. We'll get those turned first, and in the same order that it went on, it's getting turned, with those stalky ends still close to the hot part. Let's have a look at these onions. Again, lovely colour. You can see them starting to get tender. They're curling a little bit. And you just know that that colour on an onion spells sweetness. You're caramelising the natural sugars of the onion. There's a lovely char stripe on that one that's not cut. And of course, these different vegetables are offering up really very different flavours. You know, you've got the bittersweet brassica, the cabbage, you've got the natural sweetness with that slight brassica note. With the onion, you've got that that kind of mellow sweetness, but with the oniony tang. And the courgettes, you know, they're almost creamy, but the way they take the charring just develops that flavour and intensifies it. And just look at this lovely bit of colour on these now. There's going to be a bit more to this dish than just a couple of big plates of grilled veg. I'm going to make a really delicious way to kind of dress the veg, add some crunch, a whole extra bunch of flavours. And I'm going to cook on the grill something called a dukka. You may know what that is, but if you haven't come across it before, it's a North African blend of toasted nuts and spices with a little bit of chilli. It can be finished with a bit of fresh mint. And that's going to be a brilliant way to finish these veg. So to do that, I'm going to put a cast iron pan, and that's the other nifty thing about the Vulcanus. You know, you can just use it like a hob. You can put other things on here. You know, I could be boiling potatoes in the corner in a saucepan full of water, or frying an egg, or whatever it might be. You know, you've got a hot plate and all that versatility, as well as this flavour from the wood smoke coming out of the middle. So as these veg get to nearing completion, I just want to move this grill up to the hotter part, and then over here I'm going to prepare the ingredients for the dukka. I've got these hazelnuts, which I'm going to lightly bash. Now, a few of them are going to be whole. They do have a tendency to jump out like jumping beans. So I put my hand over the top and bash sideways. So I have a mixture of whole ones, broken ones, crumbs, different textures, and of course by putting them in the pan, I'm really going to develop those flavours. So when I've got them kind of bashed into halves and quarters and a few holes left, I'm going to tip that right into the griddle pan, spread it out, and then in with the hazelnuts go some pumpkin seeds and a handful of sunflower seeds. I like to keep these whole, they don't really need bashing up. Just give those a stir. Now, you don't want to overfill the pan because you want some heat and you want those seeds to toast. So you want just an even layer, not a big pile. But they're going to toast nice and slowly. My cabbage has been on for, yeah, the cabbage is pretty much done. So I think I've got enough veg here to make one lovely platter. There's a really easy way to dress this veg, and that's to actually create your dressing on the platter so that when the hot veg goes in, it starts picking up that dressing straight away. So here I've got some really nice olive oil, and I'm going to trickle that over the platter quite generously. I'm also going to put a good sprinkle of salt. I'm going to cut one of these lemons in half. Knock out those pips. Good squeeze of lemon straight onto the plate. And then if you see a pip, flick it off. Because I can tell you, nobody wants to bite down on a lemon pip when they're enjoying this grilled veg. It really is not a palate pleaser. So off you go. A little bit more of that olive oil. And also just the finest slither of garlic, which again, the heat of the veg is just going to mellow out these very, very thin slices of garlic. One clove is plenty. Just going to spread that around. And then later on, when I toss the veg, the garlic will move around with it. But the heat of the veg going onto that garlic is going to be just enough to take the edge off it. So here we go. The hispy is gloriously coloured, nice and, ooh. Now, there's always a risk that something goes down the middle. And I'd had one bit of hispy by the middle and another bit by the leaf. Am I going to retrieve that? It's quite fierce. But it's good. There's another one. I'm spreading out around so it picks up the dressing. There's a few loose leaves, but they're not too burnt to be part of the dish. That one wants a little bit more cooking. That was heading towards the cool corner. So I'm just going to leave it there a bit longer. I'm going to move the nuts around in the griddle. And how are we looking here? Yeah, these have got lovely colour on both sides. Everything's sweet and tender. You'll notice how obviously the veg is contracting a little bit, concentrating. As it chars, it shrinks a little bit on the grill, and that means the flavours are concentrating too, and we're going to get an absolute whack of delicious flavour from all of these veg. I think the courgettes are slightly ahead of the onions, so they're good to go. And just before I start putting the courgettes in, another generous trickle of oil. So we're dressing as we go. Another pinch of flaky salt. Another squeeze of lemon. Definitely no pips. And I think we can take all this off in a bundle and then spread it around. I can move my griddle plate. Must remember never to pick it up by that handle because that's going to be insanely hot. Just move those around, get the shapes going in different directions. That can probably take a little bit more colour, and then finish off with these lovely onions. Just curl everything around so it's well distributed. These white onions that haven't been cut in half are going to take a tiny bit longer. You can see that because they're holding their shape, they're not quite tender in the middle, whereas these guys are lovely and collapsed and curling, and that means they're done. And everything's starting to mingle. Last two bits of courgette off the grill. We're there with the last of the hispy. The final wedge. It's got a thickish stalk. Beautiful colour on the onions. Soft and tender now. A final trickle of olive oil. A good twist of pepper. Onto the second lemon half. Now the dukka isn't just about the nuts and the seeds, it's also about the spices. And I've got some whole coriander seeds, not going to be whole for long, some cumin seeds, and I'm going to give them a really good bash. That's almost a tablespoon of each, quite generous with those quantities. I'm not smashing them to a powder, but I'm just breaking them up because that releases their amazing aromatic flavour. And then the seeds go on top of the nuts and spices. Obviously they don't take as long to toast. Obviously I've got steel on steel, and I think I'm not getting quite enough heat into that griddle pan. So I'm going to do something a little bit radical. I'm going to take the heat-proof glove. And you know, this is the fun thing about this bit of kit. Why not speed things along by putting that straight onto the coals? That will definitely get some colour into those nuts. Now, pretty soon, I'm going to hear the spice seeds popping. Can you hear that? Crackling. And I'm starting to see a little bit of colour on the bashed hazelnuts and the seeds, and that means our dukka is getting to where it needs to be. And there comes a moment when things start burning quite quickly. So now that we've got the heat, I think we can work with the residual heat. Got plenty of heat there now, so let's lift that off. Brilliant. I just needed to get the cast iron griddle nicely hot, similar temperature to the plates here. Now I could have put the nuts and seeds straight on the plates, but you can see how they'd have been difficult to gather in. But because I've got a lip on this nice old griddle, they're going to behave themselves. But as soon as we start to see real colour, we want to stop it cooking too much. So I'm going to swap that. Pop that back down there. And let this beautiful dukka cool off a bit. To finish the dukka, a pinch of chilli. I've got some salt and pepper, but there's one thing I need from the garden. I'll be right back. And here it is, fresh mint. That's going to get finely ribboned as the dukka cools off. And this fresh mint really does give the dukka an incredible lift, and it actually goes beautifully with all the grilled veg. This is Moroccan mint, the kind you make mint tea with, but it's also a really good culinary mint. Ribbon it once. I'm not looking for mint dust, just put the knife through it a few times. Sprinkle it over the toasted nuts, seeds and spices. Good pinch of salt on the dukka. The nuts are cool enough now not to wilt the mint. And a little kick of chili flakes just at the end. I'm just going to give that all a little mix with my fingers. Before I top off this lovely plate of grilled veg with the dukka, I'm going to add one last thing. This is a hummus. It's a loose hummus, so it's got extra lemon juice. It's also made with a bit of roasted golden beetroot, which gives it this fine colour. And just to add a bit of lusciousness to the dish, I'm going to dab a little bit of this around the grilled veg. And this is kind of what makes this into a really generous, hearty main course dish. It's not just a side, it's not just a plate of veg to be nibbled at, it's a really substantial feast of grilled summer veg. And it gets finished off with this amazing Dukka, also prepared on the Vulcanus. I don't need everything that's in this plate, just enough to give some savour and crunch all around the dish. And that is a very generous plate of food, lovely grilled vegetables, caramelised corners and charred edges, the toasty seeds and nuts and the spice from the Dukka, and a little bit of creaminess from the hummus. And that is a wonderful way to celebrate summer veg and celebrate the power of the Vulcanus.